Hello, everyone. It's Alan Schimmel, and welcome to TechStrong TV from Monday, May 11th. Hey, it's another week. Yeah, another week. It gets better every week, I think. I've had more fun doing this. I hope you're doing well. I hope you and all your loved ones are safe and healthy. Maybe where you live, things are opening up a bit. You've had a chance to get out, take a walk in the park. I played golf this weekend. It was a little different. You had to wear a mask up to the tee. Each golfer had to be in their own golf cart, unless you were golfing with a family member who you live with. So it was my two sons and I, and we took two carts, and we wore our masks. There was no cart service. You had to carry your own, bring your own water and stuff. But at least it was great to get out there, to get a little exercise, swing, hit some balls. I'm a terrible golfer, but we don't even keep score half the time. Anyway, but I do hope you're well, and I hope you are enjoying what we've been doing here on TechStrong TV. You know, I've been mentioning for the last week or two, kind of a culmination of what we're doing here is a big virtual conference that we're doing called TechStrong Con. And I wanted to take a moment and tell you some of the speakers that we've got lined up for TechStrong Con, because I think it's an extraordinary lineup, and you're going to really want to check it out. So I'm just pulling up the website here, if you don't mind, and let me just tell you who some of our speakers are here. So we have Abby Kearns, CTO of Puppet, Mick Kirsten, CEO of TaskTop, Christina Pinella of Red Hat, Rosalind Radcliffe, IBM, Helen Beal of DevOps Institute, Rich Mogul, Securosis, Chenzi Wang, Rain Capital, Sanjeev Sharma, Accelerated Strategies Group. You thought those are good? Wait. We've got Leonard Ingerling from Clearfloor. We've got Patrick Dubois from SNCC, Paul Stack, Pulumi, Andrew Clay Schaefer, Red Hat. We have got Damon Edwards from Rundeck, Baruch Sigursky, JFrog, Caleb Queen, Savada's Public Affairs, Jessica Dean from Microsoft, Liz Rice from Aquasecurity CNCF, James Wickett of Verica, Cornelia Davis of Weaveworks, Derek Weeks at Sonatype, Kat Swittel, Shannon Leitz, William Hurley, of course, John Willis, and that's just some of the speakers. So head on over to TechStrongCon.com, check it out. I also want to mention that we've got some amazing sponsors for the show. Our premier sponsors for TechStrongCon are CloudBees, Harness.io, Palo Alto Networks, and the good folks at AWS. We also sponsoring the show are Influx Data, Instana, Science Logic, SNCC, Lightstep, Acaronis, New Vector, and I can't read the last one there, Connectall. It's very sorry. We'll also feature a special AWS pavilion. So TechStrongCon.com for more details, free registration, June 4th. Let's not miss it. For today's show, we've got a good Monday for you. I've got a couple of good interviews I want to highlight. One is with Mo Plastening of CloudBees. You know, Mo he's kind of led the charge on a bunch of the acquisitions CloudBees done over the years, one of which was the Feature Flag company they acquired, which is now CloudBees Feature Flags. And they've come out with a new iteration of the Feature Flag product that it now allows you to run it kind of on-prem or your own private version of it in the cloud. So it's not as a SaaS version if you have compliance or regulatory issues that prevent you from using a SaaS version. So good conversation with Mo coming at us from Austria, where he's been for the last 2.5 months. Then I have something really interesting from a company called Interos. I interviewed Andrea Little Limbago there, and they do a lot of research. Andrea's their VP research there. And one of the things they're looking at is government internet blackouts, right? So the government is shutting down, not our government here in the U.S. necessarily, but this is, throughout the world. Governments shutting down internet to prevent the spread of information, whether it be fake news that they claim it is or real news. But how does that play into conspiracy theories taking hold? And is there a correlation between these government internet blackouts and the kinds of information being spread and how it's being spread? And how does that correlate to COVID-19 results, right? So the thought being that halting the spread of information does not halt the spread of the virus, right? It allows, and the virus actually is worse in countries like that. Though, I think it's open to discussion. But it's a really good interview with Andrea, and I highly recommend it. From the Something Old vaults today, I went back to GitLab Commit in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. I guess it was last September or October, for a little interview I did with Dan Kahn, Executive Director of the CNCF. And it was really about the upcoming KubeCon in San Diego. But more than that, it was about the state of open source and the open cloud native community. And who better to tell you about it than Dan? I think you'll enjoy that Something Old interview. I'll then come back with the news and then turn things over to our managing editor, Charlene O'Hanlon. Charlene has two good interviews set up for us today. Shimon Aran, VP of Research at Deep Instinct, and Thomas Johansson, CISO at SCTG. Then we'll head over to the analyst quarter. Mitch has a new flash poll he'll be running out, as well as some commentary on what's going on. And then it's Monday, so we have a Mike Vizard channel roundup. And Mike's guest this week is Dmitry Agropolo, VP of Platform and Architecture at SonicWall. So that should be a good one. And then I'll wrap things up. So it sounds like we're going to have a great Monday, folks. We're going to take a quick commercial and be right back with our first guest.
Tech is strong. We may be working from home, but tech goes on. Tech will continue to collaborate. Tech will continue to communicate. Tech is strong. Join us for TechStrong Con, June 4th, 12 hours strong, Tech Strong. Featuring John Bacciagalupe Willis, Shannon Leitz, William Hurley, Jasmine James, Kat Swatell, Cornelia Davis, James Wickett, Courtney Kistler, Damon Edwards. Live Q&A with speakers, exhibit halls, and more. Free, but register before spots fill at techstrongcon.com.
Okay, back here in the studio for our first interview segment today. As I mentioned, our first interview is with Mo Plasnik. Mo is with CloudBees. He's kind of led the charge on a lot of the most of the acquisitions CloudBees done over the last year or two. But now he's sort of transitioned more into an operational role where he's helping to run some of the companies that they acquired, one of which is the product line, which is now CloudBees Feature Flags. And they recently released a new version that allows companies who, whether for regulatory or compliance reasons or for whatever reason, don't want to use a SaaS shared version of the Feature Flag product, you can now run it on-prem, private cloud, what have you. Mo's going to talk to us about that and more. He comes to us from Austria. So now let's go to our interview with Mo Plasnik.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on this segment. My guest for this segment is Mo Plasnik. Mo's a friend of mine from CloudBees, and he's coming to us today from Austria, where he hasn't been stranded, but he's passed the COVID shelter in place for the last 2 months or so. Mo, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Hello, welcome everybody.
So I hope things are good in Austria. We were talking off camera. They seem to have done a decent job in flattening the curve there. The Apple Store is opening soon, which is always a good sign. I guess like the canary in the coal mine. So good to see you and good to have you on. So Mo, for those who aren't familiar with, where your background, your position with CloudBees and what you work on. Why don't we start there? Why don't you give them a little bit of your history?
Yeah, let's do that. So I joined CloudBees about 2 years ago. CloudBees acquired a company I started called CodeShip, which is a continuous integration, continuous delivery platform, a SaaS product that CloudBees is selling now under the name CloudBees CodeShip. And then I did a variety of different things at CloudBees. I was responsible for acquisitions, and as you probably know, or maybe have heard somewhere, we acquired two companies last year, Electric Cloud and Rollout. And today we will talk a little bit more about Rollout. So I did that for a while, and now I'm responsible for a couple of business units within CloudBees. One of them is our feature flag business. Another one is our SDM business. So I'm back in a role where I'm working a lot with customers, our product teams, bringing new products to market, which is really exciting.
Absolutely. It's funny, I was involved in a rollout in a roll-up in the .com era. We did about 30 acquisitions in 36 months. And the transition, like you, I was on the acquisition team, and we had a due diligence team under us, but I was more strategically, targeting or figuring out which were the right companies to maybe go after. And then at some point you transition away from that, though, to more of an operational role, running some of these companies that you acquired. And it's fun. It's a good time. It's a good thing to do. You mentioned Rollout. You mentioned feature flags, Mo. So I know what it is. You know what a feature flag is. But not everyone in our audience is a developer or a DevOps person. For those who were wondering, it's not capture the flag for all my security friends out there. It's feature flag. A little different. But why don't you give them a quick education, Mo? What do we mean when we talk about feature flags?
Yeah, so what we mean with feature flags is if you look at how companies and how software development teams are developing software, right? You have your developers, you create a new capability, a new feature, you write some code, then you build and test that code, and then you usually deploy and release it and roll it out in some way, right? Maybe you have a fully automated continuous delivery pipeline, maybe you still have a more manual release process, but you somehow put your software into production. What usually happens when you do that is, right, especially when we talk to larger companies that have very complex release processes, is that releasing software, it's always a big event, right? You work towards a specific release, you have many people involved, and then on a given day, everything really has to go well to put the software online. You maybe have to coordinate with a press release, right? You might do a bigger announcement, your marketing team gets involved, other teams get involved, the communications team, and that creates this really stressful environment where you do the release. If you use feature flags, you can take the stress out of all of that. What feature flags mean is that you can basically, with the press of a button, you can toggle on and off features or other capabilities or a whole product, right? It has feature in the name, but you can really flag pretty much everything. So what you can do if you use feature flags as a concept is you could say, we as a development team, we created new capability, we already deployed into production, right? We do that whenever we are ready, but it's not, the new capability is not visible yet to the customer. So you're able to decouple deploying the code change and releasing to the market. And then whenever your marketing team does the press release and puts the blog post online, they can just go into an interface, press a button, and then this new capability, this new product is live. So what it allows you to do, among many other things, feature flags allow you to decouple the deployment of the code change and the release. And the release can be done by the business and is not tied to a certain developer or to a release engineer anymore, which is really powerful.
Excellent. One of the best definitions and explanations of what feature flags are that we've heard, Mo. Thank you very much for that. So the whole feature flag thing, as you mentioned, came to CloudBees as part of the rollout acquisition, which you headed up at CloudBees. But now it's called CloudBees Feature Flags, right? The product. It's a product line. And recently some big news in terms of how customers will be able to deploy this. You want to share?
Yeah, so yes, so really exciting. When we to go back a little bit, right? When we acquired Rollout, which was a company that was offering a feature flag as a service product back then, to maybe talk a little bit about what that means, right? When you do feature flags, right, what you need to do is you add snippets to your code, right? You're saying this portion of the code is behind a feature flag, so it shouldn't be visible to users yet. That other portion can be visible, right? So you do some work inside the code, and your development team needs to do that. But then there's a second component to it, and that second component is the management platform, right? That's where your marketing team logs in. That is where they see all the capabilities and where they can press a button and release a new feature, or where your product team could say, I want to release this new capability to only 5% of the users in Australia, right? You can do all those things, but to do that, you need a real feature flag management platform. And what we have seen before the acquisition is many companies try to build that in-house, and it's quite complicated. It usually starts with, we just do some feature flags, an if statement here, and we flag some code, but then over time you figure out, okay, I want to do those gradual releases, I want to do this, I want to enable my marketing team and my product managers to do certain things, right? The scope becomes bigger and bigger, and that is why you usually then at that point decide, okay, let's just buy and not build internally. Let's buy a solution by a vendor. And with Rollout, we were really fortunate because the Rollout team built a terrific product that was delivered as SaaS. So you were able to go on rollout.io, create an account, log into that product, right, and use it as a SaaS product. What became clear after the acquisition is, right, as you know, CloudBees serves many of the world's largest companies, and as strong as the trend is towards cloud, and we see that firsthand, right? Many of our customers are moving to the cloud. A lot of that is accelerating in the current time, but there's still a lot of software running on-premise for various reasons, right? In regulated industries, that's sometimes required. There might be other reasons why a given company just wants to run a vendor product themselves. They don't want to use a SaaS product. And what our philosophy here, and I know it's a long answer, but I will get to it. But our philosophy here at CloudBees is that we always meet the customer where the customer is, right? And if the customer decides, I want a SaaS product, great, we have it for you. If the customer says, I want to run this myself, I want to run it inside my own data center, we also have you covered. And so what we announced today is that CloudBees now is the first company, the first vendor in that space that is launching and releasing an enterprise-grade feature flagging system that you can download and run inside your own data center, on-premise, inside your own firewall. And that is, I think, really, really exciting, because if I look at how many of the customers I talk to are currently doing feature flags, they're really limited because they don't have access to modern tools, because there is no other enterprise-grade feature flagging solution out there that's available on-premise.
Sure. And, of course, it's easy to just say, well, you should be in the cloud anyway, right? And that's that. But the fact of the matter is, I went to law school, right, when I was younger, and one of the things you learn in law school is you take your plaintiffs as you find them. Right, there's a case of the eggshell skull plaintiff. A guy had a very thin skull and he fell, and of course cracked his skull. But the defense was, well, had he had a normal skull, it wouldn't have cracked and he wouldn't have had these damages. Well, it was common law case, going back to English common law. And they said, well, that may be the case, but you take your plaintiffs as you find them. It's the same thing with feature flag customers, right? You take them as you find them. If they're not ready, or they can't for a variety of reasons, move to the cloud, what do you tell them? Well, sorry, you can't use feature flags. That it's kind of like a double penalty, right? And so it would create an even wider gap between those who use cloud and those who don't, and what capabilities they have. So this is important for that reason. So why doesn't everything move from the cloud, have an on-prem counterpart? Well, there's reasons, right? I remember when GitHub, for instance, started offering GitHub on-prem, a GitHub Enterprise on-prem versus a hosted. Well, number one, you need to be able to have the bandwidth, the resources to host these kinds of things. I don't know if that's a big consideration here. But also number two is you need to have enough expertise, right, to keep this thing up and running. How big a issue is that?
It's really straightforward in the case of our cloud-based feature flagging solution. So we, on purpose, the way we build it, we make it really easy for you to run it yourself. That was always a goal of ours, right? We don't want to make it harder necessarily. We understand that if you as a customer, if you are not able to use a SaaS solution, that's already makes it a little bit harder, right? We don't have to make it even harder. Our job is to make it easier. So we build it in a way where it's really easy for you to start it up and provide it to your developers inside your company. And then what we are also seeing, to your point about the move to the cloud, right? If I look at large companies, there is, right, it's not a binary decision, right? It's not that you are in the cloud or you're not in the cloud, or you're on-premise or you're not on-premise, right? You do both, right? All those large companies, they are transforming, right? I know digital transformation, it's an overused term, but that transformation is happening, right? Companies are modernizing. Companies, especially now, realize automation and DevOps is really, really important, right? If everybody suddenly works from home, can't access maybe that one server, or can't go to that data center, and you can't do this and can't do that, and you can't have certain manual processes, right? Automation is really, really important, but you won't change overnight, right? If you are a large financial services company, you won't turn off your data centers overnight and put everything in the cloud. And then what we have seen, and that's an interesting use case as well, even when you move to the cloud, it doesn't necessarily mean that you use SaaS products, right? There are many instances, and we have seen that firsthand in cloud, is where customers use a cloud provider of their choice or multiple cloud providers, and then they still decide to run certain products like our CI product or our CD product, or in the future now our feature flagging solution. They still run that solution inside their cloud account, right? It runs in the cloud, but it's not running as SaaS. And so that case exists as well, which is why we internally often talk not just about on-premise, but we call it self-managed, right? The big division is, do you use a SaaS, which is a managed service, or do you use the product in a self-managed manner, either in the cloud or on-premise?
Mm-hmm. I mean, that is a good logical distinction between them, right? But so when I first got into tech 25 years ago, I had started what became a hosting company. And very quickly, that became the distinction in hosting, right? Do I just give you a web server and you have at it, or do I manage your hosting account for you? Do you want to use FTP to upload files, or do I have a nice little nifty, file uploader built into the GUI kind of thing that automates it? And that is, a big distinction. We should also mention, though, that sometimes there are compliance and regulations that come into play here, which prevent companies from going to a cloud, especially a public cloud type of environment, and that's yet another reason why you would want to do this on-prem. I think also, look, here's the facts. We talk to a lot of companies, as do you and CloudBees. We live in a hybrid multi-cloud world. It's rare that you could point to, especially to a large organization, and say, oh, all their assets are on AWS, or all their assets are on GCP. Everyone's assets are spread around in public cloud, private cloud, data center. They do a lot of SaaS-based tools. They'll have multiple public cloud. And that's the way it's probably going to be for a while. So as a provider like CloudBees, you can't have second-class citizens, whether They're on public cloud, private cloud, and what have you. So applaud. This is available now?
It is available now. Yes, you can go on our website. You can actually download it right away if you want, and you have to accept a little agreement. But you can download it. You can run it yourself. Should be up and running even on your local laptop pretty easily. Or if you are a company and you really want to try it out in a more serious environment, you can easily put it wherever you run it. Your data center, your cloud environment, as you said, it works in both. And our belief is we need to meet you as a customer where you are, right? We are not the ones to tell you you have to use SaaS, right? The world is moving towards SaaS. You have to use SaaS. If you want to use SaaS, great. If you want to run it yourself, great. If you want to do both, because maybe one business unit inside your organization is already very cloud native and using a lot of SaaS products, and another one is still running their own data centers, great. You can get the exact same product, right? It looks the same, it feels the same, developers have the same experience, product managers, marketing, they all have the same experience. And that is how we think about providing products to our customer base.
Excellent. Well, we're about out of time here. I want to thank you for joining us. Good luck getting back to the U.S., right? In a couple of weeks, maybe. Yeah? God willing. Anyway, and you know what else? It's also good to see CloudBees continuing the evolution and development of these technologies and companies that they've acquired, right? As we move to this bigger SDM, SDA kind of picture. All righty. Mo Plasnig, CloudBees, here on TechStrong TV. We're going to be right back with our next guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Okay, hope you enjoyed that. Our next interview today, I think, is one of the most interesting ones we've done. It features Dr. Andrea Little-Limbago of Interos. Interos is a company that does a lot of research and correlation and analysis using AI and other things to, put together things that may not be obvious in terms of connections. What I spoke to her about here today was, around the world, we're seeing, I don't know if it's as a result of COVID or what have you, but we're seeing more and more governments, doing internet blackouts to their population. So just trying to stop the spread of information by blacking out, shutting down the internet. And it's pretty amazing. When you start correlating that to how are these countries doing with the internet and how are they fighting COVID-19, there's a real correlation. So I don't want to steal the thunder here. Let's talk to Dr. Andrea Little-Limbago, and she can explain it better.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for this next session here on TechStrong TV. My guest is Andrea Little-Limbago from Interos. Andrea, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
It's actually our pleasure to have you. I tell people I'm social by nature. I'm used to traveling to conferences all the time, and doing these interviews are kind of my lifeline. Out to place all over the world, just like I normally travel. So thanks for being with us today. Where are you coming from to us?
Just outside of Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia.
Very cool.
And I feel the same way. I'm normally going on the conference circuit, so it's a nice way to stay engaged in the community.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I like that Red Sox picture back there.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll be playing baseball. I don't know when we're going to watch baseball again. But anyway, Andrea, talk to us. Well, first of all, what do you do at Interos?
I'm the Vice President of Research and Analysis, and so I lead a lot of our work looking at supply chain risk management and focus on multi-factor, multi-tier supply chain risks. And so I'm a computational social scientist, and so I bring in, my background is inherently bringing in the various factors from geopolitical risk to cyber risk, some stuff we'll talk about today, economic and financial issues. Obviously, the pandemic is causing significant supply chain disruptions in addition to the public health trauma it's causing. And so I bring all that together to help provide some insight and inform how these various events will be impacting supply chains and risk for various corporations.
Fantastic. We need more people like you, Andrea. I saw an interesting meme on Facebook the other day that, I'm so torn between people like yourself who have all this expertise and do this for a living versus what my friends from high school are telling me, and I don't know who to believe. We need to trust. Leave science to the scientists, leave data to the data scientists, leave research to the researchers, and stop the nonsense. But anyway, you mentioned a little bit about what Interos does, but just a little more kinds of customers, how this is packaged and consumed by people and
sure, absolutely.
Organizations.
And so Interos has been looking at helping build out supply chains. And so the important part of that, especially now, is that because they're so complex across the globe, it's not just your first tier of suppliers, it's their suppliers, their suppliers, their suppliers, and so forth. And it's just a huge network web of interdependencies. And many companies, and I'd say most companies, the large corporations, have very minimal visibility on how far back that goes. And so when there is some sort of disruption from a pandemic, from a mine shutdown, from whatever it might be that could cause a natural disaster, they don't have the visibility to see how that may impact them upstream into what they're currently producing. And so we've been providing insight into that. And so we've moved from consulting into a product company now, and leveraging machine learning like a lot of folks are, combining user experience to enable corporations to look at across their supply chain network, across those end tiers, but then overlay that with the various risk factors that are going on so they can figure out first what the visibility across their network, and that alone is extremely useful, but then how that overlays with what's going on in the world that might cause a disruption that might not be on their radar, and to help them prepare for that, looking at where there might be a concentration risk, where there might be single sources of failure, where they may want to provide more agile sourcing and have some redundancies so that when something does happen, it doesn't shut down the entire supply chain.
Got it. My initial comment is, where were you when we needed you here? Right? Hopefully this whole pandemic thing will drive home that, hey, you got to do this. This is basic block and tackle on you want to be able to have a continuity plan, a disaster plan. You want to be able to, strategize what to do on these kinds of things. Scope it out. You need this kind of basic research. Let's talk.
Yeah, I think it's kind of similar to how in cybersecurity, where companies really didn't pay that much attention to until Sony, and Sony sort of was that wake up call that made it mainstream awareness.
I remember.
And now the pandemic is obviously, we wish we never had it, and it's and hopefully we'll recover from it soon. But I think it's also been a wake up call for how to think differently about supply chains and how to think differently going ahead about where vulnerabilities are in a much broader picture.
I can't agree with you more, honestly, that, I think the problem, though, is people seem to have really short memories, right? And they get used to the new normal, and it goes back to. But that being said, let's focus in on some of the recent findings you guys have been having. I knew a little bit about internet blackouts and stuff like that. Tell us. Share.
Yeah, so one of the areas I've been looking at just most recently is just in addition to the various disruptions that we already see going on, and I think that are on the headlines right now. What might be coming next, and that's sort of where I try and look at is what we may be expecting down the road as well, is just this confluence of internet blackouts in addition to where supply chains might be vulnerable. And so it's bringing those two trends together. And so, internet blackouts is something that we really don't hear a ton about. We hear about it more on the, on Human Rights Watch in that sort of area, which is great. And they've been tracking for quite some time. But if you then look at the cybersecurity community or geopolitical risk community, I don't really see internet blackouts really rising to a level of great awareness. And it's interesting, internet blackouts cost, across the globe last year, $8 billion.
Wow.
And so they continue to be increasing from 2011 to 2018. They've increased, there were just a handful, maybe 2 or 3 in 2011. In 2018, they were almost about 200, and last year there were even more. And so we're seeing a wide range of countries using these blackouts as a means for suppression and censorship at the domestic level. And if you think about, and that's where you get that multi-factor view comes in so handy. So if you start seeing some geopolitical risk going on, and you start seeing either some protests, an election coming up, a rebel group, certain governments, and and this is where you also need to figure out how the government structure plays into this. Certain governments will be more prone to leverage internet blackout as a form of censorship to stop information flowing into certain areas. And so that's exactly what we've been seeing.
Oh, I no doubt. So to me, this is a two-headed monster. There's the internet blackout, and then there's the total just crushing of any privacy in the name of tracing or whatever, and just total surveillance, which is the flip side of the coin of the blackout, right? And what's interesting though is at the same time, even here in the U.S., right? I saw a recent article about freedom of press countries rated, and the U.S. was not in the top 5, certainly, and but yet we hear such an outcry of Facebook should censor stuff, Twitter should not censor stuff. Google has an agenda, and so they are censoring it in some way. But, I think 2016 hopefully taught us some lessons about the power of social media. But let's be clear, when we talk about internet blackouts, we're talking about social media and stuff like that, right? I've been in China numerous times, and I will tell you that the behavior there is people don't use the web like we do, right? Because the web is on the firewall, the Great Wall of Firewall, but yet there's a ton of stuff that kind of flies under the radar on VPNs and on WeChat and stuff like that. So,
the social media censorship. So it's interesting the way that there is a bit of a spectrum, and I think the way I look at it, overarching, it's all part of this broader playbook for information control. And so, again, in cybersecurity, we tend to think of the various range of cyber attacks that can happen. But that's just one tactic that the governments are using to access data, to manipulate data, to control data in some way. And then the disinformation, we're hearing that a lot as well, through social media and so forth. And that's another tactic that they're using. So you see all that's what's really gaining a lot of the headlines. But then getting to the broader area of information control, you do have the surveillance and the censorship both going on at the same time, which seems counterintuitive in some degrees. But if you're thinking that their objective is to find out and control information that's going on internally or as far as a global narrative, they are going to try and either block it if they can, or surveil it and gain as much as they possibly can, or flood the various social media outlets with as much information as possible, so that the reality can't actually bubble up to the top. And so they've been using these tactics have continued to expand since at least 2016, if not earlier. 2016, hopefully was a late wake-up call, at least on the election front for social media. Yeah. But they keep many of these governments, because it's really the same group of governments are doing a lot of these same kind of tactics. And so the internet blackouts is just the newest extension of what they've been doing. And so kind of like, in 2016, where more or less we thought it was mainly Russia doing the social media disinformation. Since then, it's basically, at a minimum, China and Iran are doing plenty as far as within the election front. But you've got countries like Philippines, Duterte using lots of disinformation for his local population. You see it coming out of Venezuela. I mean, these are tactics that once the major powers have started using them, deploying them pretty well, they're spreading.
No, that's the nature of the beast, right? It starts there and filters down. And look, it's definitely a nation state problem, but I will tell you, it is also a faction problem, right? I think we see it with both right-wing extreme and left-wing extreme organizations and groups here in the U.S.
Right. And that's where you get into, again, if we look at 2020 coming up the same way we looked at 2016, we're going to, it's fighting the last war, right?
Right. It's the Maginot Line. Yeah.
So if we think it's just Russia and they're going to do the exact same thing they've always been doing, we're going to be well behind on stopping what's coming and what's already here, really. And so, in addition to the broad range of nation states, you got all these non-state actors who are getting involved, and then on top of them being the international ones, because you do see like hackers for hire and disinformation for hire services on the private sector side really starting to grow, and then the domestic actors are getting involved as well. And so it's you're sort of like who's who in the zoo scenario coming in for 2020, and we have to think about it that broadly.
As I like to say, it's why we can't have nice things. Because there's just, so many evil people with agendas out there. Andrea, obviously you work for a commercial entity, so I assume you sell this information as a service or something. How does one get that service from an Interos? And then how do you integrate that into your risk and into your action plan?
Right, now that's a great question. So we have a platform now, and so we'd be happy to talk to anyone who wants to see if they can get access to the platform. And basically, what we work with the company as far as getting the first tier of suppliers, and from there we can build out the broad network for them. So it's really becomes a user interface where they can look at all these unknown supply chain connections that they weren't aware of, and look at the various factors that go along with it for when something happens, like a cyber attack or when a stock market collapse, like any kind of those kind of events, and where they're occurring, and then where they may overlay with where some critical nodes might be within their supply chain. And so a lot of that is through user experience exploration and data analysis on that regard. We still do have some consulting components for other kinds of, if they want to dive deeper into certain areas, but that they're thanks to the large growth of data that's gone on, and the machine learning behind it that actually surfaces the relevant information, so you can get rid of a lot of the noise and not have to deal with the alert fatigue and so forth. A lot of it really can be that whoever is using our product can do a lot of that now on their own without having to wait to for 3 months for some report to come into them to tell them the same thing. They can figure that out on their own and get real time alerts and so forth as far as what's going on, so they can make timely solutions.
Excellent. Very cool. What about like supply chain issues? So there's two that keep me up at night. One is our medical supply chain, right? For the last month, I was scared to death because it seems everything that we needed was coming from China. And first China was shut down with their own, dealing with COVID. And then you start wondering, what their geopolitical aims are here in terms of how accessible their supplies that we desperately need here in for our supply chain. So one is medical supplies like that. And then the second one is here more of a domestic issue, our food supplies, right? Meat processing and so forth. Is this kind of stuff that Interos would cover as well, or that it's not really?
No, definitely. And we look at different verticals. Absolutely. And so if you look at, and that's the thing that I think, what we've been doing for a long time, which is now, increasingly common knowledge, is just how dependent we are as a country on China for producing. And oftentimes it won't be that, it'll be like, Apple's always the example lots of people use as far as when you go back down, the various where the chips are made and where some of the natural resources are, a lot of that traces back to China. And so when China gets disrupted, like it did in Wuhan, and when they have to shut down entire areas where, where we rely on that production, that those are ripple effects that trickle throughout numerous different industry supply chains. And so I think what we're What we already were seeing a little bit leading up to this was what's called reshoring, is basically moving away from certain geographies. And so it's interesting, over the last month or two, we've seen a lot of major headlines on more of the foreign policy, foreign affairs kind of community, as far as, is this the end of globalization? Because of all these complex supply chains, is that, has that just left us too vulnerable and people are going to really just retreat and isolate? And, or you see the converse, like what you talked about as far as, we're just going to go back to the new normal. And I see this I think there's actually an option 3, where we are going to see a continued trend of reshoring away from China as it makes sense, but also it's much harder than, it's not just, there are actual factories and so forth that have to be built, and it's a lot harder on the logistics side to just get up and leave. But we are seeing different companies and different countries are already incentivizing to at least diversify away. And so especially on the medical supply, to get to exactly that area, I imagine that at some point there will be a commission, and there already are some discussions about this, that will require greater stockpiling of medical supplies. I do think this was a lesson learned in that area, and that we will ensure that domestically we'll have those stockpiles. And also, I think a lot of, at least from the people that I'm listening to on the government side who are working this area, is that our stockpiles we should be much better prepared should a second wave come later this fall, that we won't be going through the same chaos and trying to get from everywhere and again, going back to or trying to get supplies from China that may or may not actually, be as sound as we think they might be. And we've seen that both here and in Europe, as far as some of the PPE needs is basically not useful. And in some cases, it actually was really harmful.
Yeah, I know it's defective. Look, I think there's a lot of reasons for a lot of the chaos that we've been through. We can't blame it all on China, frankly, but no,
absolutely not. I think that's actually, it's a really good point, right? That's because that's too easy of a scapegoat, right?
But politicians usually look for easy solutions, and sometimes it's very hard to come up with easy solutions for complex problems.
It is. Exactly.
And we need to remember that. Andrea, this is fascinating. Are a lot of Intero's customers government agencies, government related, or like what's the mix?
Yeah, it's a mix. We do have government related. You can imagine the defense industrial base is increasingly looking at supply chain diversification, similar to the medical community, for similar reasons. And I think for any customer, over-reliance and over-concentration in certain areas, especially certain geographies right now, is increasingly going to be a problem. And so, even if it wasn't China, if it was somewhere else that you're over concentrated, there's a range of risk factors that are going to be involved. And so it's good to start looking at how you can diversify your supply chain, provide some redundancies, and at a minimum, just get some visibility into where your vulnerabilities might be or where your concentrations might be. And so it really, you think about many large corporations in the government are really rethinking this and taking this never let a crisis don't waste the crisis, right? To try and rethink how you might be doing business. And I do think for many companies, and not just for the government, but I think a lot on the corporate side as well, are rethinking what the new normal is going to look like, and to rethink how they can address some of the vulnerabilities that were exposed during this crisis.
Absolutely, don't make the same mistakes.
Yep, and I think supply chain restructuring some aspects of the supply chain will be part of that. Doesn't mean that everything's not going to be coming back to the U.S., but it's just going to be moving around to areas that might be less risky.
And I think it's also a matter of less concentration, right? If 30% of your goods in a certain vertical comes from China, but 70% come from elsewhere, some percent, it's a different thing than if 80% of your goods are coming from one place, and that's an issue. Andrew, we're almost out of time. We should have done this earlier though. For people who want more information about Interos, the website interos.com.
.ai.
.ai, excuse me. interos.ai, and we could. If you're watching at home and this sounds really interesting and fascinating, as it does to me, go to check out interos.ai for more information. Andrea, keep up the great work. Keep us posted on what you're finding, and we appreciate it.
No, absolutely, will do. Thanks for a fun conversation.
Absolutely. And Andrea Little Lombardo, Limbago. You know what it is? You're on a far away, even with my glasses, I can't read it from here. But thanks for joining us on TechStrong TV. Good luck and keep up the great work. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with our next guest.
Right now, software is more important than ever. It is powering the online services enabling teams to connect, collaborate, and work remotely, and allowing innovation to continue to get to market rapidly. CloudBees offers software delivery automation solutions to support all remote teams, and you can use the best-in-class tools you need to get the job done. CloudBees helps you build stuff that matters. Visit cloudbees.com to learn more.
For our Something Old segment today, I went back in the archives to GitLab Commit last September on Digital Anarchist, and it's an interview. This is an interview I had with my friend Dan Kahn. Dan is the executive director of the CNCF, Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and though we were talking about the upcoming, at that time, San Diego KubeCon, we actually spoke mostly about the state of the cloud native community and open source and the enthusiasm around this, which is driving so much of what we see in infrastructure and software and dev and DevOps today, as well as even in cyber. So here's my interview with Dan Kahn, Executive Director, CNCF.
This is Digital Anarchist at GitLab Commit, Brooklyn, 2019.
Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel for DevOps.com Container Journal, and we are here in Brooklyn, New York, live on digitalanarchist.live. Thank you for joining us. If you are joining us live, if you're watching this on digitalanarchist.io or .com, do check out some of the other GitLab Commit interviews that we've done here today, as well as some of the ones we've done at places like KubeCon and Cloud Native Con and some of the other conferences that we travel the world. Really happy to be joined by my friend Dan Kahn. Dan is the Executive Director of Cloud Native Computing Foundation.
And I'm thrilled to be here. We chatted last in Barcelona.
Yes,
we
in
had
person.
7,700 people at KubeCon, but I actually live in Lower Manhattan, and so I was
unaware of when I saw you here in Brooklyn.
So I was just able to ride a city bike over here to come join you.
Did you? How great is that?
It really is. I mean, and especially I'm going to be doing a couple more trips to China this fall, but
it's nice to do a little
I like
commute.
the city bike ride over the
I've got to tell you, so I was born in Brooklyn, raised in Queens and Long Island, and lived in the city. I moved to Florida 17 years ago, and I come back to Brooklyn now, Williamsburg, where this is.
Exactly.
And
unrecognizable, but so fantastic in terms of the level of engagement, all the tech companies around here,
it's
all
rocking.
the young people moving in.
Yeah.
Of course, nobody can afford Williamsburg, and so now everyone goes over to Bushwick.
Right, yeah, I actually have my nieces in Bushwick. And yeah, it is, how expensive it is quite an eye-opener. It's really as expensive as, well, we could talk real estate later. I wanted to talk to you about a few things, Dan. First of all, you're speaking here at GitLab.
I just gave a keynote on how good are code, and it's a pleasure to be here at the first GitLab commit. GitLab was a very early supporter of CNCF, a very early adopter of Kubernetes and working with that ecosystem, and been a member for a long time, and now Priyanka Sharma is on the CNCF governing board.
Oh, so, fantastic. I didn't know that. Is that new?
Yeah, just as of 6 months ago or so.
Okay.
So she has a 2-year term, and it's just been a great relationship where we've really been thrilled as we've been growing, and then of course they're growing like gangbusters as well.
Absolutely. And I think we're going to hear more news on that later today. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about CNCF, about CNCF
KubeCon, Cloud Native Con.
And Cloud Native Con. It's not CNCF Con. So the next gathering of the tribe is in San Diego in, was it around November 17th?
November 18th. We're looking forward to seeing you there.
I will be there. I will definitely be there.
And it'll be the largest ever open source
That's
developer
what I heard.
conference.
Someone told me 12,000.
12,000 people is what we're expecting, and that's up from 8,000 in Seattle last year. So just a little crazy.
Just a 50% growth.
Well, and up from 500 4 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's
so
crazy.
then when you add it to the 7,700 we had in Barcelona and the 3,500 in Shanghai, that's 23,000 people who are engaged enough in the community that they want to come and participate.
But you know, Dan, it's not just the pure number of how many people it is. I mean, we go to a lot of shows, some big, some small. What really just impresses me most about KubeCon, Cloud Native Con, is the enthusiasm, is the buzz. I often tell people the only thing I can remember like that is sort of the AWS reInvent early on.
Yeah.
Early on, not when it's 70,000 people or whatever. Yeah. But that enthusiasm, and I've said this also, it's the reason is it's not just that Kubernetes is so great. It's the open source community which is powering so much of today's innovation and today's development. Right. Not just software development, technology development. That open source community has coalesced around CNCF and the Linux Foundation, and they needed a home. And this is their home now, and their enthusiasm and their energy and their buzz is what is empowering not just your organization and your conferences. It's empowering so much of what we see in DevOps and containers and data ops, and if it's not open, it don't mean nothing, right?
Well,
that's the world we live in.
I agree. Our philosophy is that when enterprises pick a platform to build their software development on, they're making an implicit future bet. They're buying a call option and saying, okay, it's not just where's the platform today, but it's an entire ecosystem that they're going to be investing in for years to come. And part of the issue is they don't want to sign up and have to pay a platform tax for the entire life of the application, but they also want to know that there's a lot of other people invested in that same ecosystem. And so being able to see all of these organizations come together, all of these developers, all of these end users, gives them the confidence that they're going to be able to hire experts in it, that they can hire consultants, that they can hire vendors, that they can, if they're not happy with their vendor or their cloud, they could switch vendors. Right. And so we really do see it as a positive feedback loop where all of these different parts are coming together. They
are, and I think, I don't even know when it was, but at some point we hit a critical mass with this, and now it's a machine that, you know, it feeds itself and continues to grow. So it's an amazing thing. Dan, I don't want to talk a lot about GitLab Commit. We're going to be talking about it all day. Not that it's not worthy of talking about.
Nice event.
But I do want to talk about KubeCon, Cloud Native Con, San Diego. So what are some of the highlights that you're really looking forward to?
Sure. So a couple of them are that we're really investing in what we call day zero co-located events. So there's a challenge with the conference that we have 18 tracks, which is a lot, 12 that come in through our call for proposals. And unfortunately, we had so many submissions that we were only able to accept 11%. Wow. Which is just rough because there's like fantastic talks offered. That's 12 of the tracks. 6 of the tracks are for project maintainers to pull together contributors and potential contributors for their project. But because there's so many other areas of interest like CI/CD and observability and service mesh and others, we hold these day zero co-located events on November 18th that when you sign up for the conference, you can also decide, oh, I'd like to add in this extra day. And we really encourage people to do that.
Yeah, I mean, a couple that if you don't mind, I'd like to bring to the audience's attention is, I believe there's 1 or 2 just related to container security.
Yes, I think there's security. Both the CNCF has a security SIG that's holding their first event, and then I believe there's also a vendor-sponsored one.
Yes, there are.
Yeah.
Well, they both have vendors.
They do.
I don't want to say one vendor, one's not.
We accept sponsors.
Yeah, there's both sponsored with vendors, but both promise to be good. I wish somehow they could work it out where there'd be one, but that'll come.
Maybe in future.
Yep. Secondly, you mentioned CI/CD, of course, a sister. Is it?
That's
is
exactly
it
right.
The
The
right
Continuous
gender
Delivery
here?
Foundation.
Or do we? Is it
that's
gender
how we
neutral?
that's how we like to describe it.
All right.
It's a good question. Sibling.
But anyway, a sister organization to CNCF is the CD Foundation, also part of it, and
They're also part of the Linux Foundation.
part of Linux,
Yes.
or under the auspices
Exactly.
of Linux, and this is also happening, and very excited. They're going to have, I think it's their first one, or did they get one in Barcelona?
They did, but this is going to be a lot more substantial.
This will be much more.
as
I
it's
think they
now.
had just announced it around Barcelona time.
And then I would mention just another big area of expansion for CNCF is we're going to continue to run these 3 flagship events every year in North America, in Europe,
And
they'll
Asia.
be in Amsterdam in March, and then in
Yes,
China.
we're making plans for that
That's
as well.
fantastic. But we do see a huge demand for this kind of content and to help bring these communities together in global cities around the world. So we have a new event that we're launching called Kubernetes Forums. And the first 2 are in Sydney and Seoul in the second week of December. And it's kind of a neat setup, a little tricky, but we do 50% international speakers, 50% local. First day is that content, and then the second day are co-located events by our sponsors. Then the sponsors and the international speakers all take the red eye from Seoul to Sydney, recover on Wednesday, and then repeat it again on Thursday with different local speakers, same international, and then the same co-located events. So we're looking to do these then in 2020. So we have Seoul and Sydney this year. We're going to be doing it in Sao Paulo and Mexico City, in Bengaluru and Delhi, in Tokyo and Singapore, and then also in Tel Aviv. And our hope is to actually be able to expand from there, that we do think there's just a lot of demand.
Count us in. I don't know if I'll be able to make the Sydney Seoul one, because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we're in Lisbon.
Okay, that's a good excuse.
For Lisbon, and I'll be a Marrakesh. But the next ones, we'd love to cover
That's
this
great.
and sponsor
we
and
definitely think
participate.
there's a lot of.
What are we calling them?
It's
Kubernetes Forums.
And that's kind of our second tier of events. So still like 1,500 people.
1,500 people is
each.
the target.
And that's our goal. And then I'll also just mention in another month or so, we're going to be launching a set of events called Kubernetes Community Days. And these are being run by different community members around the world that they can help put together their own local content.
Familiar with that. That's great.
Like
I'm
DevOps
glad to
days
see it's coming down. Yeah,
or an OpenStack days.
I mean, frankly, one of the things I worried about, Dan, was that KubeCon would become too much.
Yeah.
No,
And that's
not
no, it's a
bad-mouthing
fair concern.
AWS reInvent, but it's a zoo.
Right.
And I kind of like it not being a zoo.
Yeah, and so
truth.
people miss the 500-person one. There's some advantages of getting bigger as well. But we do think that there's a range of folks, and we're particularly interested in the international expansion because we think there's so much demand.
Well, it's a big
for
world out there. We see it. I see it in our readership. I mean,
Absolutely.
only about 36% of our readership's from the U.S.
Oh, that's fantastic.
About 32% from Europe, and then rest of the world. So, I mean, that's the world we live in, right?
Then just 2 other quick non-event pieces of news I would just mention. We just last month announced that we had completed a security audit of Kubernetes.
Yes.
And this was one neat part of it is we open sourced the whole audit and all the details behind it. But CNCF paid $250,000 to 2 top firms in order to put this together. That we do think it helps build confidence in the ecosystem and in the software. And then we also just produced a report called the Kubernetes Project Journey Report, talking about the 3 years since Kubernetes has been in CNCF, how it's grown enormously during that time, the thousands of contributors and hundreds of companies and such. And we're then going to be replicating that format for our other graduated projects. But you can see both of those on cncf.io.
Fantastic. That's great news. Someone's not giving us the whole feed here, Dan.
Oh, we can definitely take care of that.
We got to work on that. We'll talk about that.
Okay.
Anyway, hey man, thanks
very
for
much
bicycling
for
over.
Oh, and
I hope you
glad to be
no
here. I
red
wish all
eye
my
here.
trips were this easy.
You and me both. All right, we're going to call it a wrap with Dan Kahn, Executive Director of CNCF, people behind KubeCon, Cloud Native Con, and now Kubernetes Forum, Kubernetes Community Days, and more. Coming at you live from Brooklyn on digitalanarchist.live. This is Alan Schimmel for DevOps.com. We'll be back in just a moment with some more guest.
With the COVID-19 pandemic, it is important to protect yourself and others from spreading the virus. Prevention and personal safety is key. Here are the top ways you can protect yourself and others. Wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Avoid touching your face. Practice social distancing and avoid high-risk potential people. If you are showing symptoms, stay at home. If you must go out, wear a face mask. Always cover coughs and sneezes with a tissue or use the inside of your elbow. Clean and sanitize frequently touched surfaces daily. Together, we can prevent this pandemic.
Okay, back here in the TechStrong TV studios, it's that time of the day where we'll do the news. So let me give you some of the headlines from Security Boulevard, Container Journal, DevOps.com. Again, not meant to be exhaustive. There's a lot more on these sites than what I'm going to tell you about here in the next 5 minutes. But I just want to give you a flavor for some of the stuff we've got going on. Let's first turn over to the Boulevard at Security Boulevard. Our friends at Disney, the mouse that roared. So many of you last week, in addition to Cinco de Mayo, may have been tweeting about May the 4th be with you, right? May 4th has become a Star Wars day, and I do it too. I wear my Star Wars shirt and everything. So, Disney, you got to love Disney. On one hand, they're imploring people to use the hashtag May the 4th be with you. On the other hand, their lawyers put out that by doing so, you've now entered into a contract with Disney, and they're allowed to use your tweets, your likenesses, your information as part of their promotion, and you agree to abide by their rules and regulations. It's not the first time Disney's legal team is overreached, and there's a reason why people say things the way they do. But anyway, Mark Rosh, our attorney, cyber expert, wrote a good article on this. It's called May the 4th be with you. Disney insisting on hashtag contracts. Have a look at it. You might find that interesting, and it may cause you to pause before you use any corporations kind of hashtags going forward. Also up on the Boulevard, we've got a letter from Senator Warner out to IoT manufacturers, and an article about the letter saying, is the time now for IoT security? I thought the time for IoT security is when we first started deploying IoT, but better late than never. Let's do something about it. There's a lot more on Security Boulevard. Please do go check that out. Over to Container Journal. We have orchestration and application performance, the holy grail of containerized microservices. Well, one would think so, with Kubernetes being the orchestrator of choice. But check out the article. You'll see more there. There's another good article up. Survey sees split in container Kubernetes adoption on public cloud. It's always good to get these surveys and see kind of what people are thinking, saying. And then over on DevOps.com, got 3 articles I want to throw you away. One is a chat I did with my friend Elan Koren at Perimeter X. It's on something he calls shadow code. We'll also have a video with Elan on this tomorrow, on tomorrow's TechStrong TV. But you can listen to the podcast, read along, and the little article that goes with it on DevOps.com. Also, Datadog security monitoring goes 6A. I think we reported on that yesterday. But again, it's nice to see security monitoring being integrated. And then we have Cisco looks to drive NetOps and DevOps convergence. They've been, Cisco and the Cisco dev team have been kind of preaching this for some time, and I think they're really serious about it now, and we'll see what effect it'll have. Anyway, that's just a couple of the news headlines today on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. Check them out, and I hope you enjoy them. Now, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and then we will turn things over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, welcome back everybody to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon and I'm the managing editor at Media Ops. I'm here now with Shimon Oren, who is the VP of Research and let's see if I get this right, Deep Learning, is that right? At Deep Instinct?
Yes.
Yeah, I got it right.
You had that right, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking a few minutes and talking with me today. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you guys recently came out with a report that says that contrary to what we might be hearing in the news about the number of malware, malicious intents or hold on, I'm going to start that over. Okay. Starting again in 3, 2, 1. Well, you guys just came out with a report that talks about the actual decrease in the number of data breaches and malicious activity related to COVID-19, which kind of runs counter to what we've been hearing in the news a lot. So tell me about what you guys have found.
Okay, so what we've done is, following the reports of a lot of cybersecurity companies out there talking about a massive increase in the number of attacks and malicious activity in general, we thought it would be a good idea to also dig into our data, our telemetry, and our threat intelligence sources, and look and understand at what exactly is happening and what's the activity we're seeing. We have a very, very elaborate threat intelligence collection and operation happening. We call that D-Cloud. It's where all our threat intelligence is gathered. And actually, when we looked at the numbers and we compared the activity, both looking at the last 4 months, I'd say since the beginning of 2020, and also looking back and then comparing the same period last year, we've actually not only, we can say that we haven't really seen a significant increase, but in some specific threat landscapes and attack vectors, we've actually seen a decrease in the number of new attacks that are generated. Now, this is not necessarily to say that the attacks that are becoming successful at infection and at compromising victims has necessarily gone down, but this does say that like a lot of the overall economic activity that is unfortunately decreasing due to the COVID-19 crisis, we're also seeing a certain reduction in the overall amounts of new malware that's generated on a daily basis.
So are the hackers actually just kind of reusing existing methodologies and malware to perform their breaches, or is it there's just not as much activity?
So first of all, the activity as far as cyberspace is concerned, and as far as malicious cyber activity is concerned, this is nowhere close to not happening or to stopping. Unfortunately, although we do have parts of the economy completely shut down, again, malicious cyber activity has not gone away. But yes, we are seeing obviously a lot of malware pieces being reused. We are definitely seeing the issues such as COVID-19 and a lot of the effects of COVID-19, the stress level of people, the the interest people are having with regards to anything related to this epidemic. Those issues and those subjects are used in attacks in order to lure victims to relevant to the places where hackers want them to be, to malicious links, malicious websites. Of course, spear phishing is really focusing in terms of the content on everything that revolves around COVID-19. But as far as new attacks, new variants of malware, and new campaigns, we haven't really seen an increase. And we believe it might be affected by it might actually be affected by what's happening by the epidemic, but again, this doesn't necessarily translate into a huge rise in new attacks or in the overall number of attacks based on the data that we're seeing.
I see. Okay, so are there certain attacks that are still more prevalent over other types of attacks, even with this data that you have unveiled?
Yes. So what we can say is again, there are certain attack vectors that have become more prominent, certain attack techniques. Everything again that revolves around spear phishing or that revolves around content that is related to the epidemic. I mean, that's the king right now, and we see that across multiple types of campaigns. In terms of the actual types of malware that we're still seeing the same types of malware. We're still seeing ransomware going rampant. We're still seeing financial malware. We're seeing a lot of spyware activity.
Really?
That's yes, and that's again due to the way that all of us have changed to some extent, the way that we work and function on a daily basis. The fact that most enterprises are now having their employees work remotely means that compromising and getting access to a machine can be a gold mine for credential theft, because we all need to log on remotely to our corporate domain or to our corporate network. To log on remotely to VPNs, to data centers, to file repositories, to cloud infrastructure, and all that activity happening from home is again a gold mine, and not only from home but from networks that are usually less protected than what you'd say a corporate network or an enterprise network would be. All that is again a gold mine and a low-hanging fruit for a lot of hackers out there.
Okay. All right. So are you seeing any particular types of hackers themselves? I mean, are we looking at mostly like espionage type hackers, or is it just kind of the I don't want to call them run-of-the-mill, but the everyday hacker who's just after, basically your passwords and want access to your accounts? But I'm thinking specifically with this kind of new work from home paradigm, and the fact that most folks are not being as cyber hygienic, if you will, as they were they on a corporate network in an office building. So is there a particular type of hacker that's maybe taking advantage of that to either install spyware, as you said, or spearfish to get the information, or however ways that they can to breach the network?
So this actually follows up exactly to where I stopped my answer on the previous question. The change in the mode in which we work and in the place in which we work from, and especially the differences that brings with it in terms of cyber hygiene, in terms of the level of protection of the network in which we're in, all that is making a lot of attacks actually easier to perform. And if not easier to perform, still it means that the attack surface, the places where hackers could at least even potentially meet us or touch base with us are are more numerous. There are more opportunities for hackers out there. That's why I mean I wouldn't say that we're seeing only top level threat actors and nation state and sophisticated groups remaining active. Those are definitely still out there. But again, this is actually a prime time for less sophisticated groups to reach and try and infect targets which are much less accessible or a much harder target to crack, let's say, than in normal times.
Okay. All right. Great. So considering the fact that I don't think anybody thinks that we're actually going to ever go back to the way things were, so to speak, are there certain things that both corporations and end users kind of need to keep in mind to be more security vigilant in this new kind of work from home, either partially or full time, and anything that they need to kind of keep in mind as they do that?
So that's actually a great question, and I think a lot of people are busy, or at least should be busy with this question. I think the answer lies in two areas mainly. First and foremost, I'll start not necessarily from the, although I usually tend to go there, but I won't start from the technology side of things. Okay. I want to start from the people side of things. The fact that we are probably going to work much more from home than we were used to, at least in coming months. Especially where, again, as far as enterprises are concerned, means that educating people properly about cyber risks, about cyber hygiene, about the different rules and regulations that we need to maintain. I mean, it relates to a lot of things, which again, I don't think we even have the time to cover. Anything from password strength and change, to what kind of VPN do you use and from where and when do you use it. And of course that relates to tools, but also of course being aware to spare phishing attacks and to content and how to properly judge content online from unknown sources or from unknown contacts. All those issues will need to be put. Really, I don't think I can exaggerate on how paramount that is going to be in keeping organizations and people safe as far as cybersecurity is concerned. Now, from the technology side of the house, I think that yes, definitely CISOs and CIOs are going to have a lot of work and a lot of thought to do, and that's going to be need to focus on how can they make sure that they have the right products, the right tools, and the right technologies that are well fit to this new situation where the network is becoming much more distributed. Assets. The main digital assets are being accessed mostly remotely and not from within the network, from within the domain, in a much less controlled area. And this has a lot of consequences. It means that we need to make sure, as security professionals, that security resides on the device, that the device has the proper products, the proper capabilities, relevant software, whether it's an endpoint tool or any kind of other tool that can work from anywhere, anytime, doesn't need to be constantly updated and to be in contact with the domain or the network. That's absolutely essential. And promising that again that the network and the digital assets as a whole are stay safe, because the fact of the matter is security professionals are going to have a harder job in coming months, and they're going to have less of something they want dearly at all times, and that is control over where our devices, to what are they connected to, how are we logging on and entering, who's holding them, who's surfing them, etc. Once all these things happen from home, naturally, the organization and the people responsible for within the organization for security have less control, and that is something that we as security professionals hold very, very dearly, but we're going to have to get used to having less of it, as I said.
All right. Well, yeah, I think there's definitely a lot for security professionals to consider these days for corporate security, both inside and outside the network. So Shimon, thank you very much for giving us lots of good things to think about. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It was great talking to you.
It was great talking to you as well. I hope you stay safe.
You too.
Thanks. Okay, everybody, stay tuned. We'll have more TechStrong TV coming up, so stick around.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to TechStrong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops, and I'm here with Thomas Johnson, TJ, who is the CISO at Server Central Turing Group, or SCTG. Hey, TJ, how are you?
Hi there, I'm fantastic. How about yourself?
Doing great. Great. Thanks so much for taking a couple minutes and talking with me today. Hopefully we can have a spirited discussion around disaster recovery and business continuity.
Exciting topics, especially right now.
Exactly. So first, let's tell me a little bit about your company.
Well, we are a consulting firm that can tap into a lot of resources that we have at our fingertips. We have retail or actually wholesale data center space in data centers throughout the world, so we can do on-prem, or actually not really on-prem, but in data center space, co-location, network, and then we can go all the way up to and through our AWS advanced partnership and do a lot of fancy and exciting things with AWS. So almost end-to-end infrastructure and systems.
Awesome. So, disaster recovery, business continuity, it's something a lot of companies talk about and say they're doing, but when push comes to shove, it seems like it's really low on organizations' priority lists. So what do you think is holding back a lot of companies with their disaster recovery, business continuity efforts, and what can they possibly do better?
Well, it's kind of interesting because I think if we had this conversation about 2 months ago, I think the conversation would be a little bit different. And right now, I think we're seeing a lot of businesses understanding the importance of business continuity planning. They either understand the importance or they are regretting that they didn't do something about it, right? But I really think business continuity planning and disaster recovery, maybe business continuity planning a little bit more, has taken a backseat because it's almost like buying insurance in a way. How much time, effort, and money do you want to spend on putting together a plan that hopefully you will never have to use, right? But I think right now, in this current climate, everybody is executing some portion of their business continuity plan, or maybe a vapor business continuity plan, if you want to call it that. So it's kind of an interesting time, and I think what's happening right now, unfortunately, is shedding light on the importance of business continuity planning and disaster recovery planning.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. When you use the insurance analogy, it's like you don't want something to happen, but then again, because something hasn't happened, you don't know if it's because you you did the right thing and mitigated it or what. But yeah, it's really something that a lot of folks, I think, have kind of discounted the importance of. But but because we are in this situation now, do you see a lot of companies that are kind of scrambling to kind of put together a business continuity solution for the quote unquote next time?
Yes and no. I think a lot of companies scrambled and put together elements of what could be seen as a business continuity plan, but it probably hasn't been formalized. It hasn't been documented. It hasn't been, well, I guess it's being tested right now.
Right, right.
But I think the after action review that's going to happen after we start to get back to some semblance of normalcy, which some people say that this is the new normal, but once we get back into the swing of things, I think organizations are going to have to take a step back and say, all right, what worked here, what didn't work, how can we make this better, and put some formality behind this. And I unfortunately don't think a lot of organizations are going to do that. I think a lot of them are going to say, all right, well, we did this, we were able to get through it. The chances of this happening again are probably small or maybe insignificant. So let's just kind of go with what we know and keep on moving.
Yeah, well, never say never, right? So you touched on the just very, very briefly on the idea of testing a business or continuity plan, and it seems like certain things would be kind of impossible to predict when it comes to. I mean, I don't think anybody predicted something like this was going to happen at such a a massive scale. So how do you test your business continuity solution if you don't know what you're testing for?
That's a great question. I teach a course in business continuity planning for the master's program at a college here in Chicago. And it's been an interesting exercise throughout this time, because all of a sudden the class that I teach is very relevant. And within this class, we start looking at scenarios and start understanding what scenarios are relevant to the business. Everything from acts of nature like tornadoes, earthquakes, and things like that, all the way to and through cybersecurity incidents and also pandemic. I was looking at some of my documentation that I put together for pandemic response, and the earliest document that I found was from 2005. So we've been kind of thinking about this and doing things within the context of pandemic planning. And I think back then, we could call it like bird flu, swine flu, the H1N1. There's been different iterations, but for some reason, this COVID-19 is a little bit more potent, fast moving, and it's really almost a little bit of a different dimension of pandemic planning, and things are happening really fast.
So do you think, because of that and other situations, do you think that companies kind of have, I don't know, short memories, or they, have like short attention span when it comes to some of these things? Because, if they're going to plan for something like a pandemic and it doesn't happen in, say, I don't know, 2 years of their business continuity planning, do you think they just kind of, brush it off and say, well, that's never going to happen, so we don't need to update our plan to reflect our response to this particular situation?
My answer is yes. I think most companies have a short attention span and a short memory. And even in the cybersecurity world, a lot of times we make fun of some of the things that happen, like these data breaches, and we look at stock prices of some of these organizations that have had data breaches and look at the correlation. Well, you know what? For example, Target or Home Depot, you look at any one of these scenarios and sure enough, their stock price goes down. It's down for a little while. Everyone kind of forgets about what happens. Their stock price is back up and, things are just happening status quo. But I think the only saving grace is some of the regulated companies that are out there. Like I come from a finance background, so a lot of my work has been done for financial institutions and banking, and they have regulations that force business continuity planning, disaster recovery planning, and I think those organizations will probably be the ones that will be able to manage additional pandemic incidents that happen in the future.
So do you think, though, that organizations that have successfully navigated something like this, do you think that kind of makes them, I don't know, maybe a little cocky for the next time, that maybe they feel like they're invincible because they were able to handle this one, in a way that allowed them to continue their operations with little disruption?
I think your analogy there is correct. I think a lot of organizations will think that they're like, oh, you know what? Well, we kind of did that. I think we're going to be good next time around. But I think that would be a false sense of security because they might have either gotten lucky, they just so happen to have things in place that, even us as a tech company, we wound up doing and since I come from a background of finance, I kind of try to implement some of the more stringent compliance-based pieces in our company. And we did a full work from home building unavailable test right before the pandemic hit. And it was interesting, some of the things that we found, like something as simple as, our VPN licensing, it was set to maximum concurrent connections of 50 people. And we've got, 130 people in the organization. We would have never figured that out unless something really happened. But because we're a tech firm, we were able to easily get the license count increased. We purchased it. It was all electronic. It's great. So I think a lot of organizations were maybe lucky if they did get through some of this without planning. And I think they will probably be a little cocky the next time things come around, and hopefully it'll work out for them again. But I'm also hopeful that they will take the opportunity to reflect on what has happened and then put some processes in place for the future.
So if a company does not currently have a business continuity plan in place, what would be kind of the basic steps that they would need to do to get one in place for the next time? What would be kind of the bare necessities?
Well, the easy answer to that is Google it.
All right, then.
There's a ton of templates out there, and there's a ton of resources out there that can help you build a business continuity plan. The first component of a business continuity plan is really identifying what the risks are to the business in the context of the various scenarios out there. So this thing called a business impact analysis is going to be really important to engage and understand what is critical, first of all. Second of all, what are the risks? What are the scenarios? And what is the ultimate worst thing that can happen to us in the context of each one of those scenarios? So understanding that is probably the very first thing you need to do. And then things can start to unfold from there.
Okay. So I imagine that there needs to be a conversation also in the C-suite to kind of get all the executives on board with any business continuity plan that an organization wants to put in place. Because I imagine there's going to be some money spent probably to make sure that the systems and the technologies are up to date and can accommodate the company in times of crisis.
Definitely. The one of the top things, and it's also a final exam test question in my course, is the fact that you need to get senior management, senior leadership, executive leadership, sponsorship, and approval for this exercise, because you're going to be A, wasting a lot of people's times in their eyes, B, spending some money, C, spending your time and effort and putting these plans together. And a lot of people, when you start going into sections of the business to try to, unfurl what is important to that part of the business, a lot of people don't like that analysis. A lot of people get a little bit nervous about that and why we're doing this.
Right.
And on the flip side, some folks don't see the value, don't see the merit, they're too busy. I mean, everybody's too busy, right?
Sure.
They're too busy. We don't have time to do this. This is just kind of an exercise in futility anyways, right? So a lot of that you're going to be met with a lot of that. And unless you have executive sponsorship, senior leadership sponsorship, and approval, you're not going to get very far.
All right. Well, it sounds like I might actually ace your final exam. So
this is quite possible.
All right. Hey, well, TJ, thank you so much for taking the time and talking with me. It's always an interesting conversation.
You bet. It was great talking with you too.
All right. Great. All right, guys, stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Okay, 2 great interviews today from Charlene. Excellent. Okay, now it's time for the Analyst Corner with Mitch. We've got Mitchell Ashley lined up, and he'll have a new flash poll today as well as some more information. So, Mitchell, over to you.
Good week, everyone. It's time to start out with our poll, of course, on the Analyst Corner. And as I've mentioned in the past, we're focusing right now on software delivery management. Our poll this week asked the question of what change metrics do you track and measure? Now, this can be build failures, things caught in production, deployment, et cetera, all through the life cycle of software. And of course, we're focusing on software delivery management, as I've talked about in the past. One of the main reasons is because of the role that software has, is, and will play in our future and the economic recovery and the acceleration through the recovery that businesses have. Now, I don't know if you saw this stat last week. Of course, we all unfortunately heard the unemployment rate, not too surprising though, I think at 14.7%, something I've not heard in my lifetime, that's for sure. Last week, Monster.com came out and noted that their top 3 job openings that they have on their site are number 1, frontline healthcare workers. Makes total sense, not surprised there. Truck drivers, delivery truck drivers. Makes sense there as well, given where we're at today. And third, software developers. It just tells you right there the importance of software and the role. People are hiring security people. There are jobs that people are hiring for. Of course, there's going to be many more people competing for those jobs, but they're out there. So hang in there. And my heart goes out to everyone who's been impacted either through a health crisis, loss of a loved one. Maybe you've been through the coronavirus cycle yourself. I know that can be extremely difficult. Or, of course, if you've been economically impacted and your job has as well. It's not fun. It's not fun losing a job, and it's not fun being in a position not sure where your next paycheck's coming from or when that will happen. So I wish you the best, and hope you will invest in things like the information that we have on DevOps.com, training that's available through any number of resources. It can be, things directly related to the kind of work that you do in DevOps or cloud native. There's tons of resources on DevOps.com and at Container Journal and Security Boulevard. And of course, there's DevOps Institute, great place to go get training. Lots of good information. And there's Udemy and Masterclass. And invest in yourself. Invest in yourself, whatever it is. It could be you've always wanted to start a drawing or painting. It could be that you've really wanted to spend more time cooking and learn some cooking techniques, take some classes, learn some more about, really the underlying, I want to say science, but underlying art and technique of cooking and creating taste. That might be something that kind of helps you lift your spirit, invest in yourself, and also can help you identify other areas that you want to invest in yourself. Now, as businesses are opening, it is on a slow roll. And different states are doing different things, as I've kind of seen in the news. Texas is doing limited, only identified certain restaurants that can open, and they have to, of course, practice social distancing and wear masks and things like that. I mean, that's happening all across the country. And I think everyone is realizing now that that's going to be a slow process. It's not going to be a rapid return to, great, all the restaurants are open, all the businesses are open. I think this really highlights the kind of investment that companies make as part of their business cycle. For example, a clothier who might be near a university is going to invest in certain kinds of products, certain kinds of suits, certain kinds of inventory, as well as, the rental things that they may have because of the time of year and what the summer looks like and what the fall pickup looks like. That's just picking one example. Of course, those cycles may have been completely disrupted, maybe permanently disrupted for, the next 12 or 18 months, maybe longer. Who knows what that impact is? So it's an uncertain time because businesses are not sure what inventory to build in. And as they've kept inventory or had inventory on hand, of course, through being closed down or through the downturn in the amount of business that they're having with customers. It creates an environment of uncertainty and not sure what to invest in. Just like you would be uncertain in your own home and your own household is this the time to refinish the basement? Well, maybe not. Maybe you're going to hold back and kind of keep that cash on hand, or maybe you don't have the cash because you're planning on a bonus coming or something later in the year. It really disrupts all those cycles, and that means that everyone's going to be going through. I don't know if I'd call it a settling period, but it is a series of, now that we can do this, what am I willing to do? Now that more things are available to us, am I comfortable going out into society and going into a restaurant? There was a really interesting article, I believe it was in Forbes, if I remember right. It was someone who just had recently taken an airline trip. And it wasn't a great experience. Wasn't expecting a great experience, of course, but the biggest discomfort from that experience was the sense of everyone around the author, as a reporter that was writing this article, and the sense of all the people, and just kind of looking at each other. Is that someone who could infect me? If I have to sit next to someone. In this case, the airline forced him to sit in his seat next to someone and then moved him. But that ensued a whole confrontation by the person already in that row who didn't want somebody next to them. So it's a unfamiliar and difficult environment sometimes for folks as we're re-entering some of those normal behaviors that we've had in the past. So while protecting ourselves with our own safety, our own health, our own, economic status, or rebuilding that, whatever that is. The thing I would mention again that I've talked about in the past is compassion. We needed compassion when everyone was moving into a work from home environment, and suddenly some people who had not worked from home are adjusting to that. I mean, it's a big change. Daily life is showing up in business. Kids pop up, wanting some milk or help with something during a Zoom call, or you need to attend to a delivery or something happening in the middle of what would be a normal business activity. You wouldn't have that kind of disruption. Show some compassion. The same is true as we re-enter society in whatever ways we do that. Now, some folks may stay at home largely for most or all the time, especially if you're in one of the at-risk categories. Others will venture out. But I know in our own experiences with our family and the people that I work with, there's varying levels of discomfort just with other people's behavior. They're not wearing masks. They're not practicing social separation. The business isn't doing things that they might do, like marking off places to stand, maybe marking off aisles and directions and things like that. So, of course, protect yourself, do what you need to do, but also understand everyone is in the same boat you are. In terms of trying to figure out how we deal with it. Now, some folks may not, put too much stock into the virus, and others may be super paranoid about it. We're all somewhere on that spectrum, but we're all people too. And so let's take care of each other. Let's understand that we're all unsure of what that means, of how we interact in society, and Use these practices that we've been doing at home in an external setting. And I think that will help us all. So give a little bit of forgiveness, not saying that you should go stand next to and start hugging people. It's not that time yet. Maybe it won't be that time for a long, long time. But understand people are going to do things that may not be comfortable for you. Just give them a break, step away, etc. Because the last thing you want is a confrontation or something to escalate beyond what you're comfortable with. And I think we'll all start to adjust that as things happen. Restaurants open, businesses open. We can do more activities. We can be outside more beyond our own neighborhoods. So as we do that, keep some compassion too for your businesses, the companies that you get goods and supplies and different things from, that they're adjusting to this too. And they're trying to figure out how do they, of course, keep their business alive and thriving if they can, and what adjustments do they need to make. So they'd like to hear from you. If there's things you would like from somebody that you normally go to for business, maybe to buy pet food or to buy clothing or whatever it might be, let them know what would be helpful. More time than any, now they're going to be very receptive to understanding what their customers want. And it's a great time for you to talk with them. So I wish you the best as you're investing in yourself. Please take the full survey that we have on software delivery management. You can find that at acceleratedsurvey.com. Of course, we have a lot of resources on our site, and we're doing some things to improve and build that up too. So we're investing in that, trying to make it as beneficial and useful as possible to everyone. We have white papers and videos and books and all kinds of things around the topic of DevOps and digital transformation. So I hope you will follow along. There's some other fun, creative things, like, for example, one of our analysts, Bob Bresselman, who's a writer and educator and software architect, software creator. He's created a comic strip, kind of a graphic novel version, all around microservices. And I believe it's actually showing up on the Security Boulevard.com site. So you can check that out. Also note that I have several webinars that I'm going to be doing, and I welcome you to join me with that. I have one this Wednesday coming up, which is the 13th, I think it is. Also one on the 21st and another on the 27th. Some of it's talking about economic rebuilding and recovery of businesses, excuse me, and the role that we and our investment in technology and creating software will play in that, whether it's on mobile apps and cloud servers, or if it's on mainframes in the enterprise. And also the security that we have to think about going forward, and what kinds of concerns might the new next normal, whatever that is, present to us in the path as we go through that. And we're also talking about the people of DevOps, the humans of DevOps, and how we support each other and provide training resources, investing in our own skills and capabilities as we journey through this process. So I wish you the best. Thank you for listening, and we will see you later in this week. Please join me on one of those webinars. You can find them on devops.com.
Hey everyone, Alan Schimmel, CEO, founder of MediaOps here. I want to personally invite you to join us on June 4th for 12 hours strong of TechStrong. TechStrong Con is our conference that we're putting together. You know, the tech industry is so built, and it was such an integral piece of our existence and identity of going to so many conferences, communicating, collaborating, networking, seeing your friends in the industries, your peers. And you know, just because we can't get together in person anymore, we can certainly do it virtually. We've been doing virtual events at MediaOps for 2 years. We think we've got them down. It's, you know, it's a really immersive experience. But what I'm really excited about with TechStrong is, you know, my friend John Willis, my partner in Digital Anarchist, John's put together an amazing lineup of speakers. I think unlike any you've seen at a virtual DevOps, cloud native, DevSecOps or cybersecurity related conference before. Check it out. Go to techstrongcon.com. Registration, attendance is free, but space is limited. We hope to see you there. It's 12 hours all day, June 4th. techstrongcon.com. Stay well, stay healthy, stay strong. TechStrong. Thanks, Mitchell. Great stuff. All right, rounding out today's show, it's our channel roundup. Get that rounding? I see what I did there. And it's our friend Mike Frizard, who handles channels. And Mike has a guest today, Dmitry. I'm going to mispronounce this name, but it's Aryapodov. He's VP of Platform Architecture at SonicWall. Some good information there. Mike, take it away.
This is Digital Anarchist.
All right, welcome to yet another edition of an interview with a leading light of our industry. Welcome, Dmitry Aryapodov.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good, thank you.
Dmitry is with SonicWall, and SonicWall is talking about this new idea called boundless security. So I'm hoping you can explain that to me a little bit, since I'm not quite clear what that means, but jump right in there.
Absolutely. So it's actually something that we started working on in the middle of last year. And the concept of the boundless cybersecurity model is to help businesses basically break free, work in a hyper-distributed environment where, there is no more perimeter, people are working anywhere. And the timing, of course, was interesting in that we launched it a few weeks before the full effect of the pandemic hit. And I think this accelerated the messaging and actually the messaging around this, and it became much more resonant because we are all hyper distributed right now. So I'm working from home. 100% of businesses are 100% mobile. So this actually fully coincided with the messaging of boundless cybersecurity. And the idea again is, how do we provide security in a hyper-distributed world? Know the unknown, gain visibility, and at the same time provide disruptive economics. And I can deep dive into some of those, but that's kind of the high-level view of it.
Yeah, let's get into how that works a little bit, because the cybersecurity people themselves are working from home, so they can't really push stuff out from the office anymore, and all the employees are working from home. So how do I navigate all that?
Yeah, there are several challenges that have become extremely, quote unquote, real in the past 2 months. And remote access, remote work. So for example, VPN business, which was kind of considered to be it sort of became a quiet business because especially with adoption of cloud services over the past decade. And all of a sudden, we've seen VPN business just boom. And I mean, for obvious reasons, because again, suddenly instead of having 10% or 20% of your workforce be remote, you have 100% of your workforce be remote. And now businesses face this challenge of not only enabling over the weekend 100% mobile workforce, but also doing so securely. And this brought in a plethora of challenges, such as, for example, I'm a security conscious individual. I have a certain level of security in my house, but effectively as an IT administrator, everybody's home network effectively can become your problem now, right? Whatever Linksys router from 15 years ago running Linux kernel 2.4 with all the vulnerabilities is now part of your problem. So how do you secure that? And many businesses couldn't just hand out laptops to every corporate image, fully patched, all that laptops to everyone. So they're forced to allow employees to work from their home devices. So now, again, how do you not inherit the IT problem and the Windows 7 unpatched laptop from home? How do you not inherit the security problems with that onto your network? So a lot of that has really surfaced to the top of the discussion over the past 2 months.
And what am I doing? Am I pushing out a perimeter firewall to the edge, or how does this all work? Just walk us through it a little bit.
Sure. There's several approaches, and I like talking high level, but I also really like discussing things kind of where the rubber meets the road. And I typically have these discussions with a public service announcement of whoever you're using. There are two things you absolutely should do: is two-factor authentication right away, right? Because you now have people logging in from uncontrollable devices. The username and password of the least security conscious person in your organization is effectively your perimeter now. But let's let that sink in. The least security conscious person in the organization, their username and password, if they get phished, if those credentials get stolen because they have some sort of malware on their home PC, if you don't have two-factor authentication, that's the way into your systems now remotely. I, as a hacker, can just get those credentials and log in. It was true before, it's just accelerated even further now because of the 100% mobile workforce. There's another thing where, I read a lot of advice between system admins on the forums. Don't open up remote desktop, just don't open up ports directly. So what some of the things that you can do is allow very granular access, granular VPN. I know this word gets thrown around a lot, but there's a difference between, for example, opening up a full tunnel, like I'm at home, and allowing me to build a full tunnel to the corporate network, right? That effectively allows anything at my house, whatever the dirty computers that my kids might have, et cetera, to travel into the corporate network. Another way to do this, and to completely isolate the client and not worry about that old Windows 7 laptop, is to give, for example, an HTML5 RDP session into the network, right? Because it's RDP5 and HTML, there's only a single TCP connection that goes through a very controlled, it's only from this device over to a specific resource. There's no drive mapping or anything else like that. And you know that even if the user, if you add that with two-factor authentication, you now know that even if the user is logging in from a virus-laden laptop, whatever, right? Whatever they had at home, you are not exposing your corporate network to that risk. Does that make sense?
Gotcha.
That's just one of the highly tactical, but something that people can grasp onto right away, things that can help. And of course, then we talk about having nice endpoint clients. We talk about cloud application security with their businesses who have 100% of their resources in the cloud. So this VPN conversation is alien to them. How do you now, as an IT administrator, for example, how do you monitor and how do you secure that kind of direct from customer to cloud communication from their home, right? And this is where tools such as cloud application security, CASBs, et cetera, come in. So this is coming back to that whole concept of the boundless cybersecurity, is that you don't have a boundary anymore, right? And wherever, anytime, anywhere, wherever people are working, it's the ability to secure them and give them secure access to the administrator without also overwhelming the admin.
So is this something I buy, or is this more like a set of blueprints and architectures that I should be employing on top of a firewall or a gateway, or what is the actual physical motion of making this work?
Sure. It's in many cases it can be both, and I'll kind of walk you through the spectrum. A lot of people actually have these capabilities. They already have them, in there. So before you go out and buy, as much as everybody would love for you to buy everything, check what you already have, because you might actually already have the capabilities. You might need to expand the licensing, but on the firewall, it might mean just enabling, for example, in the case of VPN, for example, we're talking VPN right now. On the firewall, it might mean enabling VPN, but that's a broad tunnel approach. You also have a concept on the firewall. You might also have the concept of a virtual office, and this is where you have that ability of creating an RDP HTML5 bookmark, or a Citrix bookmark, or an internal intranet bookmark, which gives very, very pinpoint access. But that's suitable for smaller environments. I recommend typically let the firewall do the firewalling stuff, let dedicated VPN gateways do that. So if you're a large organization, just go to it directly. You probably already have an SSL VPN device, time to dust it off. Make sure you patch it. Oh my God, so important. Make sure it's fully patched. It's internet facing, right? And they're critical. And believe me, one of the trends right now is that the attackers they know that there's this rush to roll out VPN, that people are dusting off their VPN devices, right? And this is the gateway into the company. Make sure it's patched. But anyway, with the VPN appliance, right, you have things like federated single sign-on. You give a portal to the user logs in, and they have a nice little office of here's my desktop, here's the intranet, here is the HR application, here is business analytics. And by clicking any of those icons, they get maybe an HTML5 control, or they get it in their own browser, but all of that is super secure. And it protects the corporate network from whatever garbage they might have on their home network. That's the VPN aspect, right? The cloud aspect is you have a cloud security service, which through APIs talks to Office 365, talks to G Suite, talks to Dropbox, Box, and anytime that a user connects to that cloud service, they work in the cloud through APIs, they're constantly talking. So any action that Dimitri, the user, takes on Office 365, Office 365 checks with the cloud security service, is this okay? Dimitri just uploaded a file to MS Teams, or for example, to Office. Is this file infected? Dimitri just uploaded an Excel spreadsheet. Are there social security numbers in the spreadsheet, right? And because they're talking through APIs, the security service can actually go in and remediate instantly, delete the virus-laden file, remove and notify the administrator if there's a DLP violation. So that's on the cloud application security. And obviously on the client itself, there are advanced AV clients integrated with ATP capabilities. That's more of a last line of defense on the endpoint client. So we talk VPN, cloud, and client.
Okay. Do you think that a lot of organizations are going to revisit these architectures? Because to your point, they did try to roll this stuff out over the weekend, and they're probably discovering that the VPN maybe doesn't scale, the gateway or the firewall is being overwhelmed. How do I kind of go back in if this is going to be the new normal? Because we may not ever be back in an office full time, or a lot of people are certainly going to be working from home for the foreseeable future. So is there a way to kind of go in and retrofit this stuff quickly, or what's involved?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And that's exactly what we witnessed. At first, in mid-March, it was, I saw countless discussions and conversations that are like, I just came out of the executive meeting. They told me that by Monday, the entire workforce has to be remote. What do I do? Like, help me, right? So we're past that phase. And I think, the customers and the companies that I speak with right now they're more like, they're past that rush, the initial rush. And their capabilities for spiking up the licenses, that initially are developed for things like blizzards, and now we're in a super extended blizzard, right? And now that you're exactly right, now they're going back and they're kind of delinting the rollout that they did. So if it was just make everyone operational in the first phase, now they're going back and all the things that I talked about, especially the things like tunnel versus just precise access to a specific desktop or a specific application, that's exactly what they're starting to roll out. The advice, one of the comments I had from a customer was like, I was interviewing them and they said, Dimitri, all that advice about have a fully patched Windows 10 system with endpoint control, that sounds great in theory, but that's not reality. Because again, we just sent 3,000 people to work from home and with whatever they got at home. So what they're doing right now is if they gave them broad access on all those home devices, now they're narrowing it. Now they're, one other customer that I spoke with is, this is also a good time to think of how your IT infrastructure is going to look differently on the, going forward. For example, this was a large university in Europe, and he said he had previously, out of about 50,000 users on the network, students, faculty, researchers, everyone, they had about 1,000 daily active users of MS Teams, 1,000. In a matter of 2 weeks, they went to 25,000. Okay. And he kind of said, like, when we come out, I'm starting to rethink of where we invest in our infrastructure, because going forward, that's what people will be using, right? And he kind of uses this example of, I have old professors that are using Office 97 who just got forced to using cloud services and they actually like it. So this was like a forcing function to move them forward. And now he's thinking, okay, I no longer will have to support certain things that might have been on-prem. Now I have to move things more either into cloud or make them remotely accessible. I have to beef up my remote access capabilities. I have to make sure that whatever licensing I have for the cloud services is sufficient. If there's access to on-prem, I have to make sure I have sufficient bandwidth, because whatever was accessed from LAN is now being accessed remotely over WAN, right? You don't want there's certain, I mean, these are kind of at the 1,000 foot level type problems instead of 10,000 foot problems, but these things multiply. You've got 10,000 people that run into a grind or congestion, and that becomes the experience, and that becomes unpleasant.
What do you think is going to be the role of SD-WANs as we go forward here, and how does that come together with firewalls and security? And will there be, for that matter, more convergence of networking and security management?
Yeah, I think SD-WAN, SD-WAN was already on the rise kind of from a disruptive economics perspective, right? And there's SD-WAN is also a broad spectrum of conversations, right? But a lot of SD-WAN deployments were about cost savings, providing reliable connection. I think this will become increasingly important because again, coming back to the point of we're now hyper distributed. We are 100% distributed at this point, and reliability of connection, reliability of connectivity is now crucial. This is effectively a business continuity discussion now. This is not even only a cost saving. What might have been a cost savings conversation before is now a business continuity conversation. So absolutely, we'll see, and we've taken the steps about 2 years ago to integrate SD-WAN into our firewall products, but from a cost savings perspective, allowing our customers to reduce costs, et cetera. And now we're looking at, how to roll out SD-WAN as a service and integrating SD-WAN into other capabilities. How do you provide a stable, reliable, fast, low latency connection to resources, whether they're on-prem, whether they're in the cloud, whether they're voice, video, like how we're talking about right now. Again, this is now a business continuity discussion. So it'll be absolutely crucial.
Do you think we'll also see an acceleration of interest in all things AI and automation because of the number of end users we're trying to support? And a lot of companies might not have as many people as they used to have, so they're going to be looking for some way to be more efficient. So what do you think the ultimate impact is going to be on security management as we know it?
I think the crucial, and our view is that the crucial word you said there is automation, right? AI is just a tool to use for better automation. And why do we want to automate? It comes back to the economics, right? There's a gap between the resources available versus the resources expected, right? Or the amount of work. And it's the automation tools that can help us close the gap. Companies are not going to be able to rush out and hire 10 more admins, right? And if anything, it's going to go the other way. So fewer admins have to be able to do more, So absolutely automation. I want to focus on automation because again, AI is a means to an end. Automation itself is the goal here. There will be more automation. Automation can take many different forms. It can be things like, for example, allowing. I'm a product manager by training, so let me speak product manager speak. You want to find problems, right, and then you find solutions. So my problem as an administrator, for example, when I need to roll out 1,000 different branches and refresh them, is I'm just one guy and a dog, maybe, right? How do I do this in a scalable manner? Well, wouldn't it be not? And by the way, this is one of 13 solutions that I might be responsible for. So I can't spend 1 month unpackaging boxes or configuring things. What I want to do is I want to just send them out to their locations. And I'm giving you a specific example that we're doubling down on. I want to send out Office in a box. I want to send out everything that an infrastructure might need at a branch or a retail location, and I want it all to phone to the cloud, phone home, come to my management console, and I'm just sitting, drinking my coffee in front of a management console, creating templates, and I see the devices pop up, and I say, oh, everything in California should take these rules. Oh, these units are in Germany. Well, there's a different regulatory domain. They should take these templates, right? And I just see this is part of automation, right? Where we call it zero touch and centralized management, where the entire infrastructure just works beautifully together through a single pane of glass, zero touch. And what the end result is obviously cost savings because I don't have to hire 10 more people, but I as an admin can actually get my job done, right? I take half a day to pre-configure the templates, pre-configure everything, and then everything else just happens automatically, right? And I don't have to, so that's one. I mean, obviously to some other people, automation may mean things like take all the logs, collate them, show me only things that matter. That's crucial, right? Especially now with, people got used to network logs, but now they also have remote work or endpoint logs. How do you collate all that info and figure out what actually requires paying attention to? It's a problem that's been kind of plaguing the industry for at least a decade, right? Target being the poster child of that. But again, automation is a broad term. It's crucial. There's certain domains where we're doubling down, like one example that I gave, but it will all drive towards actually enabling people to manage with the new reality.
Hey, Dimitris, thanks for stopping by and sharing your expertise.
Thank you for having me.
All right, guys. Alan, back to you, or back to the show.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Okay, that's going to call a wrap for Monday, May 11th. We hope you've enjoyed TechStrong TV. We'll be back tomorrow. It's Tuesday, John Willis Day. We've got some great other interviews as well. We'll also have a working from home workout with Jeremy Jones. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, I hope everybody's well and safe. Stay well, stay strong, TechStrong.